Sophia slammed her suitcase into the taxi so hard the lid popped and a dress sleeve drifted onto the wet curb. Betrayal tightened my throat before I could sort the rest of what I felt. I stepped out from under the building awning and said, "Sophia, what are you doing?" The light from the street lamp cut the taxi door into a rectangle of yellow. Marco stood between us, his coat buttoned, his hands unused at his sides. I have lived with a particular H for years, a pattern of being close enough to touch and never being the one reached for first. That pattern is the problem tonight. I pushed past the taxi and the metal smell of rain and rubber filled my nose as I forced my feet toward them. I had come to return Marco's spare keys, not to become a witness. Why now? I asked, and the word came out sharper than I wanted. My voice had the raw edge of someone who had practiced calm and failed. Marco didn't move. He just watched Sophia fold a note and slide it into her clutch. His face did not give me an answer. Sophia did not look at me when she answered. "I booked the flight last month, Elena. I told him a week ago. I can't stay waiting forever." She snapped the clutch shut as if to contain more than her passport. The taxi driver tapped the horn. Rain ran in thin lines down the taxi window. Emotion route, betrayal. The word lived in every motion I made that night. It made my hands clench around the strap of my bag. It made my questions sound like small, thrown things. Betrayal is not only what Sophia did. It is what Marco allowed by folding silence around her leaving. Marco finally spoke. "Sophia," he stopped. His voice was low and measured. He chose single words instead of sentences. He had always been careful about how his words landed. "Sophia, if you have to go, I have to go," she said. "You know that?" Sophia swung her scarf over one shoulder, the fabric cutting a pale line against the dark coat. She had the posture of someone closing a door rather than breaking a promise. I stepped forward. Rain hit my face and felt like small pins. "Marco, why didn't you tell me?" I demanded. The question was not polished. It wanted a direct answer. The taxi driver leaned forward, muttering numbers into his radio. The lobby door sighed shut behind me. Marco's eyes flicked to mine. He looked tired in a way that did not fit his usual steady reserve. He kept his hands in his pockets. "Elena," he said, the name pulled out slowly. "This isn't how I wanted you to hear." Sophia cut him off. "Elena, I am not telling you anything else. Goodbye." She dropped the last syllable like a coin into a well and climbed into the taxi. The driver mouthed the fare, and the taxi's engine coughed twice. I watched the taxi pull away. The streetlight made wet reflections on the asphalt. The taxi's taillights blood red as it turned the corner. I felt a change in the ground where I stood, a small shift, no violence but unmistakable. My hands shook and I tucked a loose wave of hair behind my ear the way I always did when I wanted to slow my breathing. Marco followed me to my car. He walked with the tight, purposeful steps I have known since university. The same rhythm that told you he had already decided what to do and was simply walking to the place where those decisions became visible. He opened the passenger door before I could ask him not to. Inside the car, the air smelled of leather and warm amber aftershave. Marco sat with his shoulders angled toward me, the space between us a measured distance. He started the engine and let it run, watching the dashboard lights in that low, steady way he has when he is holding himself back. I felt my anger shift into a sharper, more practical tone. I needed facts. "Why didn't you stop her?" I said. "Why now?" Marco's jaw tightened. "Elena, this isn't about you and Sophia. It's me, choices I made. I can't change what's already been decided." He stopped speaking as if the sentence itself might fracture something fragile. His eyes kept returning to the wet window like he was checking whether the street had kept its meaning. I reached for the glove compartment while he spoke and found a folded boarding pass tucked behind the owner's manual. My fingers hesitated as if the paper could burn. I unfolded it and saw Sophia's name on the stub and a date stamped 2 weeks earlier. A second paper slipped out and landed on my lap. It was a small handwritten note addressed to Marco. "Elena, I can't be the second. I'm leaving." The discovery changed the rhythm inside the car. My emotions shifted again, from betrayal to stunned anger. Betrayal had been a hot, tight thing. Anger made my voice louder in my own ears, and I used it to demand truth. "Marco, what is this?" I asked, holding the boarding pass like evidence. He swallowed. I knew she planned to go. I knew it, I thought. He stopped. His hand went to his signet ring and rubbed the metal with his thumb. A small, meaningless motion, and yet it looked like a confession. You thought what? My questions came faster. Syllables hit the closed space between us. The city hummed outside but felt very far away. Marco's voice dropped. He forced each word out slowly. I thought I could keep her. I thought I could keep you both. He exhaled once, a short, exhausted sound. I couldn't decide. You couldn't decide. I repeated. My hands tightened on the ticket until paper creased under my nail. Marco, people don't keep people. Did you ever choose me? He looked at me then, properly looked. For a moment his guardedness slipped, and I saw the man who taught me to drive on ice, and who stood in front of the market stall the year my mother fell ill. He had always protected, often without asking permission. He lowered his eyes and said, Elena, I made mistakes. I let things drag. I thought I was protecting you by not forcing a choice. I was wrong. The admission landed like an object being set on a table. It was solid and undeniable. My next move was sudden. I took the folded note and held it where he could see the handwriting. Sophia, she couldn't be the second. You still did nothing. Who you protecting? Marco. He looked away. Rain tapped the roof of the car in a steady rhythm. I was protecting what I thought would keep us from breaking. I was protecting them from hurt I thought would hit if I chose badly. He leaned forward and placed his hands on the wheel. Elena, I never wanted to hurt you. Then why didn't you tell me? My voice dropped to a level that contained a small, searching pain. I needed a reason, any reason that would fit the facts. The city lights smeared across his cheekbones. Why did I have to find this tonight? A long pause followed. Marco tapped his ring again. The gesture had become a metronome of indecision. I was afraid of losing them both. I was afraid of choosing and being wrong. He spoke quickly then, each word a small stumble. Sophia, she would leave if I couldn't decide. I thought if I waited she might change her mind. I thought that by not choosing I was keeping a door open. That explanation shifted my understanding in a new direction. The emotion that rose was not only anger but betrayal folded into pity. My mind supplied images. Him sitting at his kitchen table turning over possibilities, typing and deleting messages, holding phone screens in the dark. I felt my anger cool slightly and become something else. The hard ache of realizing I'd been kept as an option, so I was an option. I asked because I needed the words to be said aloud. He flinched at the label, no, Elena, not an option. He faltered and then found a steadiness. I was cowardly. I thought I could spare you by not forcing a choice. I see now that spared only me. We spoke in short sentences after that. The conversation changed rhythm to the quick, clipped exchanges that happen when people try to say the worst without making it worse. Marco. You left me on the sidelines for years. I said, Elena, I'm sorry, he replied. Sorry doesn't change the nights I waited for a message that never came. I said, doesn't change the way I measured my life against her trips, her work, her decisions. I know I failed you. Then he reached into the pocket of his coat and produced a small pendant tied to a chain. He held it out to me with a hand that trembled at the edge of steadiness. The pendant was familiar, an old silver locket I had once worn when I was 22 and thought small things could mark whole futures. I took the pendant but did not put it on. My fingers felt the cool metal and the tiny hinge under my thumb. The object became a concrete thing that held a choice rather than a phrase. My next emotion was clarity. I understood that a physical object could now represent the bargaining over affection. Why this now? I asked, why give me this? Marco, because I can't take it back, because I can't unmake what I've done. Because I want to show you that I'm trying to choose. If you'll let me. His words landed with a vulnerability that had weight. He did not demand forgiveness. He presented the pendant as if offering it on a scale and waiting for me to weigh it. Anger returned in a smaller arc. I put my thumb on the locket's edge and slid it closed without opening it. I won't let you fix years with a small thing, Marco, I said. You don't get to decide my terms by giving me a trinket. My voice was quiet and clear. He looked wounded and then earnest. I know. I don't want to make this about a thing. I want to make it about choosing you, if you'll allow me the chance to prove it. His hands were steady now. Elena, will you come with me tonight? Let me explain. Let me be honest for once. He used the word honest, like someone lighting a long, overdue lamp. I thought of Sophia's closed back in the taxi, the way she folded the note, the finality of her steps. I thought of the boarding pass with her name and the small cruelty of its quiet evidence. My next emotional motion was toward caution. I was tempted. I felt the pull of old habits, the desire to accept rescue because rescue had always come from him. Marco, I said, I will not be rescued instantly. I need actions, not a speech. I need decisions you make before you ask me to stay. I set the pendant back into his palm and pulled my hand away so the contact stopped. The distance felt deliberate. He nodded slowly. I understand. Tell me what I need to do. Tell me what you need. I gave him a list that started with small demands and built to larger ones. Tell me the truth when you are torn. Do not leave decisions to silence. Include me in things that matter. He repeated each demand, using my name. Elena, I will tell you. Hearing my name tied to promises felt both comforting and raw. We drove to the deserted bridge because talking in the car felt like rehearsing. The bridge had cold metal rails and an amber light that made wet surfaces shine. When we stepped out, the wind pulled at my cardigan and made my hair cling to my cheek. It was there, under that light, that I forced the question that had been the lung of my nights for years. Did you ever love me first? Marco stopped and looked at the river below. His breath made a small fog in the air. It wasn't that simple, he said. Then he turned to me fully and said, I loved you in different ways. I loved you as shelter, as home. I loved Sophia differently. When Sophia left, I realized my fear of hurting you had kept me from choosing you in time. We argued then, rapid and sharp. You chose not to choose, I said. You let someone else walk out before you claimed me. I didn't know how to claim without hurting, he said. I thought I could do both. Have you and keep peace. I was wrong. Marco, this doesn't erase what I felt, I said. I know, he replied. I can't erase it. I can only ask to be allowed to act differently now. The confrontation reached a peak when I forced him to admit that he had seen Sophia's note weeks earlier and had done nothing. He could not produce a single reason that excused the silence that let someone leave. The admission was the climax of the night. The point where the truth landed and both of our choices became unavoidable. After he spoke, I took the pendant from his hand, opened it once to see an old photograph of us at a market, 2 young faces, awkward and warm. I closed it and set it against my palm like a stone. Then I did something simple. I told him I would not accept an immediate rescue. I said I needed time to decide whether I could be the person who would stay with someone who had let her be second. He watched me step away toward the lamppost. I turned the pendant between my fingers, testing the hinge, feeling the weight of metal and the heat of my own skin. Marco remained by the car, his hand on the roof as if holding himself there. He called my name once, softly, fully, and then stopped. I stood under the amber pool of light and felt the rain cool on my neck. The street was empty except for Marco's parked car and the wash of distant traffic. My last thought before I walked to my own car was a simple, concrete decision. I would not accept being chosen only after someone else left. I put the pendant in my pocket and slid my fingers over it as if to remember the feel of something both given and withheld. When I closed my car door, Marco's car pulled away slowly and then stopped. He watched my car's taillights fade down the street. The final beat of the night was not a grand phrase, it was a small, clear action. I folded the boarding pass into an inner pocket of my coat and left Sophia's note where it had been, an evidence of an end. The pendant pressed against my ribs through fabric, a future hinge still undecided. I started the engine and drove home, the city light slicing the rain into lines on my windshield, and the choice I would make next waiting on the other side of a week of decisions. I yanked the passenger door open while the rain struck the car roof in hard, clean stabs. Betrayal tightened my chest so fast I could taste metal. Marco, I said, and the name came out like a question and an accusation at once. He blinked at me in the amber pool of the street lamp and did not reach for the door. I still smell wet leather and his cologne when I think of that night, but the smell was not what pushed me forward. I had watched Sophia slam a suitcase into a taxi earlier, watched a dress sleeve drift onto the curb, watched her close the taxi door with one steady hand. I remembered the way I stepped out from under the building awning and asked, Sophia, what are you doing? And the way Marco had not moved then. That exact memory, the slam, the sleeve, my empty hands sat under my ribs and made each step toward the car feel loud. Anger rose first and then folded into something colder. Betrayal became the reason I could not stay inside myself any longer. I leaned across the slick leather seat and planted both palms on the dash so Marco could not look away. "Marco, why did you let her go?" I said. He shut his jaw. He touched the signet ring at his pinky and said, "Elena, not now." The words were short and precise, and they landed like an order. I held his gaze until he had to explain or snap the conversation shut. "Not now." I repeated, "Sofia is leaving a city, Marco." She put a boarding pass on the seat and closed the door. "Did you know?" My fingers pressed into the leather. Rain tracked down the glass like slow, exact tears. Marco's face tightened. He turned the key and the engine breathed under us. The city this late felt hollowed out, saved for the two of us, and that smear of light over the pavement. He started to drive slowly away from the taxi queue. The movement was a refusal and a protection at the same time. We moved along the avenue with the rain sliding off the windshield in streaks. I watched his face from the corner of my eye and listened for any admission. He kept a distance in his answers, not because he did not hear me, but because something else guided him. Doubt came after anger. Doubt made me ask smaller, sharper questions. Was I ever more than second? I asked. His fingers drummed the steering wheel. "Elena, you know what I owe." He did not say what he owed to Sofia, only that obligations had been deciding for him. That made my chest tighten again, but a different pain, the old low ache of being compared, moved under my ribs. We drove past a shuttered florist and a deli with a single neon cross blinking. I kept talking because silence would let his distance settle. "You promised me once you'd tell me first," I said. "You promised you'd tell me if things changed with her. Did that promise mean nothing?" Marco's jaw worked. "Promises are not always possible to keep, Elena." He sounded tired. That tiredness made my anger shift into a sharper edge. I felt exposed and foolish and suddenly very small. I breathed in the car's warm air and felt the rain on my sleeve. He pulled off the avenue and turned into a narrow back street, headlights falling on wet brick. The alley by the taxi rank came into view, a place where someone might have left a photograph or a boarding pass without thinking. I did not want to believe those objects could be evidence of finality, but some part of me needed proof. We stopped. A taxi idled with its meter glowing. A driver stepped out and held two items, a rain-scraped photograph and a folded boarding pass, damp at the edges. He walked over and placed the items on the trunk as if laying a report on a table. His hands were bare and red from the cold. The driver said nothing. He tapped the photograph with the tip of his finger so I could see the crease. The photograph showed the three of us on a sunlit terrace the year before, Sofia laughing, Marco with his arm half around me, my smile softer than the moment had felt. The boarding pass had Sofia's name printed on it in black ink and a destination that looked determined. I picked the photograph up with shaking fingers. The paper was cool and slick. A taxi driver handing over an object felt like an external judge. His quiet motion pulled the blame into sharper focus. I looked at Marco. His hands were tight on the steering wheel. An emotion I had not admitted, shame, stoked behind my teeth. Shame at having waited, shame at expecting to be chosen. "You knew," I said. I did not rise to a shout, but my voice cut the air in the car. "You knew about the ticket and you still stayed." The allegation lodged between us. Marco took a breath and said, "I kept what I could." "Elena," the phrase sounded like a confession and a defense at once. He would not say he had let her go. He would not tell me whether he had intended to step forward or to cover for somebody else's choice. I opened my mouth to answer and then stopped. There was a pendant in his other hand when he turned it over on the center console as if deciding whether to show me. The pendant had belonged to Sofia once, thin silver, a small amethyst that caught the streetlight. I remembered seeing that pendant on Sofia's throat at a party the previous spring. My hands found the small silver locket I always wore. I fumbled with it without realizing. The familiar weight anchored me. Marco's thumb rubbed the signet ring. The two pendants, one in his palm and one at my collarbone, felt like a ledger of leaves turned and leaves kept. He did not look at the photograph. He looked at the pendant in his hand and then at me. "I didn't let her go without trying to keep some piece of what mattered," he said. "I thought if I kept this, she'd come back or we'd fix it. That was not what I wanted to hear." His attempt at preservation sounded like a slow, careful theft of possibility. My next words were small and quick. "So you preserved her. What about me? Marco's movements tightened. He drove the car another block, hands steady but his jaw clamped. Elena, He stopped. He tried to reframe things, but the rain made his words breathe out into slow, breathy syllables. I climbed out onto the curb because staying inside felt like surrender. The rain hit my face and threaded my hair to my cheek. I gathered my bag and the photograph suddenly weighed like a witness in my hands. A passing pedestrian glanced over and then away. The city gave us space to finish whatever we were starting. Don't go, Marco from the doorway. He sounded small when he asked it. I turned just enough to see his mouth. Elena, don't go like this, I'm not going to be second anymore, I said. And the words came out steadier than I expected. I felt a shift inside me, a refusal to be rearranged to suit someone else's priorities. That refusal was my second emotion shift, betrayal to resolve. It made the night feel dangerous in its possibilities. Marco came around the car in quick, unplanned steps. He had the pendant still between his fingers when he reached me. He opened his hand and pressed it into my palm without a word. His motion was decisive and abrupt. The pendant was cool and it left a small damp ring on my skin. For a beat there was only the rain and the zip of a distant tire. Marco closed the space between us until his coat brushed mine. The proximity made my heart rate jump. Not a soft romantic thrum, but a physical alert, a noise of blood in my ears. He saved Reach for protection. He took Reach as claim. Elena, he said, in a voice so low it felt like a private thing. Take it. If you were going to be angry, take something that belonged to her. I can't keep saying no to what the world demands of me. I pressed my fingers around the pendant. Flashbacks of earlier small moments surfaced. Sophia threading the pendant through a coat loop, Marco catching her hand when she stumbled at a gallery opening. Those images were precise and concrete. They were not vague regrets, they were actions I had witnessed. The new information shifted my understanding. He had not been absent out of indifference only, but out of a calculation tied to obligations I had never seen fully. I looked at Marco and felt my third significant feeling move through me, doubt folding toward a need for clarity. I wanted to ask whether the pendant meant he had hope or whether it meant he could not face a direct choice. I wanted him to say clearly whose side he would be on if Sophia stayed or if she left. Marco, what does this mean? I said. Does this mean you chose to keep a memory instead of choosing me? He hesitated for a long second, thumb rubbing the ring at his finger, as if searching for a way through the sentence. It means I kept a thing I shouldn't have kept, he said. It means I failed to act in time. It means I'm asking you for time to make it right. The words were not the answer I needed. Time sounded like another postponement. I felt anger flare again, sharp, cutting, and then a cool, collected decision take its place. The night had forced my hand. The external fact of Sophia's boarding pass, the photograph, and the pendant pressed in my palm had made the stakes concrete. Either I accepted this late offering or I refused it and left. I turned the pendant over with my thumb. The amethyst caught the lamplight. I did not hand it back. I let it rest in my palm like a test I could carry silently. I'm not yours to pick after the fact, Marco, I said. He closed his eyes briefly, then looked at me with a steadier face. I know, he said. I know you aren't. That's why I'm asking now. His voice held something like fear, a vulnerability I had rarely seen. He had always been the one to study faces before speaking. Tonight he was the one offering and waiting for a decision. A taxi door slammed in the distance and the sound made us both jump. The external interruption felt like a judge dropping a gavel. It pulled attention away from our bodies and back into the world. I felt a small, private laugh of frustration at how the city would not let us have a quiet, private failing. Marco, I said, choosing my next words like stepping stones across a flooded street. If you re-asking, then ask properly. Say what you want. Tell me whether you will stand with me if I refuse to be second again. Tell me whether you'll let me walk away and not follow because you can't bear to choose. Say it clearly. My voice did not shake. That steadiness was my action, my way of setting a boundary and testing whether his offer held weight. He opened his mouth and closed it once. Then he said in short, broken lines, Elena, I will not ask you to wait. Elena, he stopped and swallowed. I watched his throat work. I will take responsibility for what I let happen. I will not ask you to be patient for my mistakes. There was the rapid back and forth that arguments needed. 3 short lines, then 3 more. Marco, are you saying you'll choose me now? I asked. Elena, I am saying I will choose you if you let me. He answered. Marco, that's not the same as choosing now. I shot back. Elena, I understand, he said. The exchange left us both open and ragged. He reached out and, without pronouncing another promise, stepped back enough to give me space. The final decisive movement of the night was his. He let go of the need to control the result and pressed the pendant into my hand as an offer rather than a replacement. I folded my fingers around the pendant and slid it into my pocket. I did not accept on impulse. I tested the air around me by stepping back and keeping my hands visible. My refusal to grab at a swift, convenient comfort felt like an education in dignity. Marco watched me do it. His eyes tracked the motion of my hands as if they were maps. I said, I need time. I need you to mean what you say and to let me see it in action, not in tokens. There was a pause between us that was not empty. The rain ticked at the hood of the car. A bus blew a soft horn 2 blocks away. The city continued to move while we made a deliberate, slow choice. Marco nodded once. He did not try to change my decision or press me into acceptance. He closed the car door with a soft click and walked back to the driver's side. He started the engine, and for a handful of long seconds I watched him through the windshield as he sat there and let the car warm in the rain. I took 1 step, then another, and began down the lamppost-lined street where the light pooled in shallow dishes along the pavement. The pendant sat in my pocket, a cool lump against my ribs. I kept my shoulders straight and my steps measured. The night weighed on me in a way that was not all heavy. It had the precise, raw edge of a change in arrangement. At the corner, a taxi idled open and the driver held out his hand. I nodded and climbed in. I did not look back until the driver pulled away and the taillights of Marco's car blurred into a narrow line. When I finally did, he was a solitary silhouette under the amber light, hands still at the wheel, watching me go. The photograph remained folded in my bag like a small accusation and a record. The boarding pass had been taken by the taxi driver, who had lit a cigarette and tossed the stub into the rain. I could still see Sophia's name printed on that paper when the image rose inside my head, precise and blunt. That name would not disappear because I refused to be second anymore. It would need to be resolved by actions, not words. As the taxi carried me away, I pressed my fingers into my pocket until I felt the edge of the pendant through fabric. I did not open my hand to look. I let it sit there as something I had been given and had chosen to hold privately for the moment. Marco's silhouette shrank with each block until the city took him and the rain took his coat into soft blurs. The night closed around me in its ordinary noises, brakes, a late train's distant rumble, a dog barking twice then stopping. My heartbeat had slowed but did not settle. I had asked for a boundary and he had accepted the risk of that boundary. That acceptance did not resolve everything. I looked at the wet photograph in my bag one more time and thought of the way Sophia had slammed her suitcase, the abruptness of her leaving, and the evidence left in a taxi seat. That concrete moment had forced me to move. I had demanded a choice. I had accepted a small token and turned it into a test. When the taxi stopped at my block, I stepped out into the smell of damp pavement and salt. I crossed the street under the amber lamp, felt the pendant press once more at my pocket, and walked up the stairs to my building. I kept my steps even and did not run. At my door I paused, put my hand on the brass knob, and felt the cool metal under my palm. I did not know how Marco would prove himself. I did not know if Sophia would stay away. I did know this. I had stopped waiting passively for something to be given to me. I had stepped into the street and asked for an answer. That action altered the map between us. I closed the door behind me with a firm push, and the click sounded like an ordinary, final thing. The pendant bumped once against my ribs as I reached for the light switch. Outside, a car door shut 2 houses down. Inside, I turned on the lamp and set my bag on the table. I opened the photograph and smoothed the wet crease with my thumb. The final sound of the night was my key locking the door. It was a small, concrete action that sealed the night's decision into place. I would wait, but not as second choice. I would let him show me his choice in the days to come. For now, the pendant sat in my pocket, the photograph in my hand, and Marco's car a distant amber dot, disappearing up the avenue. When I hung my threadbare cardigan over the back of a chair, I felt the pendant's coolness as a private weight. I folded the photograph and slid it into a notebook. I made tea while the apartment filled with boiling steam and the scent of lavender from the little sachet in my drawer. I sat at the table and waited for the kettle to calm. The night had given me a decision to hold and a boundary to enforce. The consequence of that decision would arrive in small actions. A call returned, an invitation refused, a door knocked instead of a gesture left on a table. I had asked for him to mean it. Now he had to show it. Outside, the street lamp splashed amber across the windows. The pendant rested against the fabric of my pocket, and I could feel its outline with my fingertip. I let my hand rest there until the warmth of the metal reminded me that choices were things you could carry, test, and return if they did not fit. Some things had changed tonight. The photograph remained as proof that Sophia left. The boarding pass had confirmed the leaving. The pendant was a new variable I would keep private until I saw proof. Marco had offered and stepped back. I had accepted a moment to decide, and then I had decided to demand time and action. The night ended on the simple, definite sound of my door locking. I slammed Sophia's boarding pass onto the concierge desk and demanded an answer. Betrayal tightened my throat the way a muscle knots before it cramps. I could taste metal at the back of my mouth. "Sophia left," I said, and the words hit Marco like a thrown stone. He took 2 steps from the foyer and did not reach for the door. The lobby smelled of lemon polish and wet wool. I did not introduce myself. I pushed the paper toward Marco and let the clock in the marble wall measure the silence. "Marco, why did you let her go?" I said. My voice did not tremble, but it carried the hard edge of accusation. He looked at the boarding pass, then at me. His face closed like a door. "Elena," he said. He put his hand on the desk but did not touch the pass. This was the concrete problem. Sophia left and Marco had not decided. The choice had been avoided for years and it sat between us like a second person. I had spent evenings comparing myself to Sophia without ever saying it aloud. I tightened my fingers around the strap of my bag and remembered the night Sophia slammed her suitcase into the taxi, the dress sleeve that blew onto the curb, the lid popping open. That memory was a fact I repeated to myself, not an abstract ache. The dress on the wet asphalt, the taxi's door sucking closed. Marco had watched that scene without stepping forward. "Marco, answer me." I leaned forward and the concierge cleared his throat, watching the 3 of us as if we were a discreet argument. "Marco," my tone was a demand and a plea at once. Because betrayal had already set the map of the night. He could have stopped it earlier. He could have asked Sophia to stay. He swallowed. "Sophia left, Elena. She gave me a choice and I did not give one in return." His voice was low. He might name the way people say the name of someone they have wronged. It sounded like a bruise. Emotion moved in me like a tide. Betrayal first, then anger. Marco watched my hands, he watched my face. I stepped closer and put the boarding pass into his palm. The paper was damp at the edge from where Sophia had slipped it into my coat earlier. "You chose not to choose," I said. "Explain that." I set the stakes. If he had left things unsaid for years, tonight they would be spoken. He looked at the pass, then at me, then finally at the concierge who had resumed tapping a ledger. "Elena, come with me for a minute. Please," he said quietly, the kind of quiet that asks permission. I followed him into the private elevator because the lobby had become a jury and I would not let strangers witness the next seconds. The elevator closed. The lights hummed. Marco pressed the button for his floor and did not look at me at first. I stood facing him and pushed my palms flat to stop my hands from fidgeting with the thin silver locket at my throat. "Why did Sophia leave?" I said. The question was short. The elevator smelled of leather and a faint tobacco trace that always trailed him. Marco's jaw worked. She would not be second, Elena. He kept his voice steady. "She left because she would not wait for me." His hands were steady, but his thumb rubbed the signet ring at his finger. I heard the small click he made with the ring and it anchored him. What he could not say, his hand betrayed. Anger shifted into disbelief in my chest. "She left because you didn't ask her to stay." I said. "You let her go and you let me watch her go." I said Marco's name more than once that night. Saying it felt like setting a series of small traps. Each repetition forced a different answer. Marco's eyes met mine. "I thought I was protecting you both," he said. I thought I was preserving something." He stopped. He had never been good at long speeches. He closed his mouth and looked at me the way someone looks at glass after it cracks, trying to see if it can be put back. Before I could push further, a sound interrupted us, boots on marble. A delivery driver stepped into the hall and held out a sealed envelope, Mr. Vital. "Delivery for you and Miss Rossi," he said. He handed the envelope to Marco and left without waiting. The arrival shifted the room. The elevator air suddenly felt colder. I opened the envelope on the bench in the corridor because my hands needed something precise to do. Inside, a torn photograph slid into my palm. The image showed the three of us at a restaurant last spring. Sophia laughing with her head thrown back, Marco with his hand halfway to her shoulder, and my smile smaller, edged in a way I had avoided looking at since. The paper had been ripped down the center. The edge that used to meet my face was missing. A short note fell out too. "Elena, I can't compete for a place that isn't honest." The torn photograph was a new fact. It changed the frame. My anger sharpened into accusation. "She chose this," I said to Marco. "She didn't run because of you. She ran because you let her see she could leave. She chose herself over the waiting seat you were offering." My hands trembled now. I held the torn edge of the photo, as if it were evidence in court. Marco closed his fist around the envelope. "Sophia gave me an ultimatum and I failed to answer it," he said. "I thought by not choosing I was avoiding pain." I was wrong. His voice was short. He had moved from defense to confession. The emotion in him had shifted. Guilt crept in where stoicism had been. We sat on the bench under the amber lamp, because the corridor felt safer than the lobby. "Tell me why you didn't decide," I said. "Tell me why I was always second." My words were simple, and they wanted a concrete reason. He swallowed. "I was afraid of losing what I had with both of you," he said. "I thought if I decided, I would break something. I told myself it was kinder to keep the door open. I see now that keeping the door open left someone standing in the rain." He rubbed his thumb across his signet ring. "I'm sorry, Elena." "I'm sorry, Sophia." The apology landed and then waited for a response. We both had to act after that apology. Sophia's choice and the torn photograph forced movement. The driver had gone. The envelope had done its work. I stood. "Marco, show me the truth," I said. My voice had changed. It demanded a concrete gesture, not a confession. He rose and led me toward the building entrance. At the entrance, the rain had let up to a thin sheet on the pavement that shone under the streetlight. I remembered the night Sophia slammed her suitcase into the taxi, but this time I watched Marco move like someone who had finally been pushed into a corner. He opened the passenger door of his parked car and held out a hand. "Get in," he said. It was terse and direct. Inside the car, the warm amber light blood from the dashboard into the leather. I sat without thinking and closed the door. Marco moved around to the driver's seat and then reached across, deliberately, to lay something in my palm. His hand was steady. A small pendant rested in his palm, the same thin silver I had worn for years, but with a faint engraving on the back I had never noticed. MV. The emblem felt warm from his skin. The pendant was a symbol. It spoke without words. I lifted it and found its weight honest. Marco watched me. "I didn't give you this before because I thought it would mean less if it arrived after she left," he said. "I thought I could keep things in the gray and that everyone would be fine. I was wrong, Elena. I am choosing you now." He did not ask me to accept it. He placed it and waited. My first reaction was to pull back. I put a hand to my throat where the thin silver locket sat and pressed. The small, familiar weight reminded me of the mornings I had hidden in the kitchen while Sophia took the window seat and Marco took the other chair. Memory arrived in concrete images. The chipped mug Marco used, the scar at my eyebrow when I hit it opening a door, Sophia's neat scarf folded exactly on the coat rack. These were facts, not feelings. I thought of the note that had said Sophia would not compete for a second place. I remembered her leaving the taxi, the sleeve that had blown onto the wet curb. For months I had rehearsed how I would say I was fine. Now the pendant sat in my palm and the choice was given to me on terms I could not accept or reject abstractly. "Marco," I said. The name came out slow. Why now? I needed a specific answer. I needed an event, not a phrase. He closed his eyes for a fraction of a second and then opened them. "Because she left the photograph on purpose, and because the delivery came with a note that forced the truth into the open," he said. "Because I saw the way you folded your shoulders when she smiled, and I told myself it was nothing. Because I finally understood that not choosing is itself a choice. He gave a short, hard breath. The confession felt like progress. I considered the pendant. To accept it now would be to step into a space shaped by Sophia's exit. To refuse it would be to claim that I would not be someone's choice simply because someone else left. My chest tightened in a way that wanted a physical motion, to step back, to walk away, to open the door and leave the engine running like a rebuke. Instead, I sat shoulders squared and let the car's small interior measure the moment. Say her name, I said. Sophia, he said. Say what she said to you in that note, I demanded. He repeated the line from the paper. I can't compete for a place that isn't honest. Hearing it aloud made the night sharper. The phrase had been written. When he said it, it became a sound that needed to be answered. Then tell me why you allowed two people to wait for you instead of choosing one, I said. He looked at me, and for the first time that night his eyes were bare. Because I was selfish and afraid, Marco. I wanted to keep a future with both of you, and I thought I could fix what I broke later. I see now that I fixed nothing. I hurt you both. I'm trying to make amends now, Elena. I know apologies are thin without action. He lifted his hand and turned the pendant in my palm so the engraving caught the amber light. We argued then, but it was not a storm of words. It was compact and sharp. Elena. You left me waiting, Marco. I thought it was kinder, Elena. Kindness does not let someone stand in the hall and watch a suitcase leave, Marco. I was cowardly, Elena. Why should I accept this because she left? Marco. Because I chose you now. The exchange was short and repeated the names to track who spoke. Each line landed like a small test. At least 3 times we went back and forth in quick lines. The repetition forced clarity. We did not let the argument become an endless spiral. Each reply demanded a concrete action. Marco offered the pendant. I considered it. He admitted cowardice. I pressed him for specifics. I wanted to know how his choices would change tomorrow, not in a vague promise, but in actual steps. He answered in specifics. I will stop keeping a door open. Marco, I will invite you to dinner, and not Sophia. I will cancel any plans that keep me from being present. I will ask you decisions rather than assume. I will speak first when something matters. He listed items like tasks because words like commit felt too big. Each item was a measurable change. I would not accept a list as proof. I wanted him to demonstrate it, then prove it tonight, I said, not with words. With one small act. The small act I requested was concrete. Meet me at the corner cafe tomorrow and let me order without him deferring. He blinked, then nodded. The night had one more unpredictable motion. A figure appeared beneath the streetlight where the rain had left a faint sheen. Sophia walked back toward the building. She had her coat folded around her like armor. She stopped at the entrance and handed something through the half-open door. My threadbare cardigan neatly folded and slightly damp at the hem. She did not speak to me or to Marco. She did not hesitate. She turned and walked away. Sophia's return lasted perhaps 10 seconds, but its effect lasted longer than any speech. Her action reframed her as the one who removed herself, not as someone to be fought over. Marco watched her walk away the way a man watches a train until it disappears. I watched Sophia's hands as she pressed the cardigan into the threshold. The gesture was simple and decisive. That was the twist. She did not come back to fight. She came back to give me something, and then leave so the choice could be mine rather than a contest. My anger at her dimmed into a different feeling. Respect folded into a small, quiet ache. I had expected a dramatic plea. I received a final, practical kindness. The stage had shifted. Back in the car, Marco closed the door and folded his hands on the steering wheel. She left the cardigan on purpose, I said. She meant for you to see the truth without a fight. I felt a new emotion rise. Clarity. Betrayal had begun the night. It had moved to anger and guilt. Now I had clarity about who Sophia had been and who Marco could be if he chose differently. I lifted the pendant again and then, deliberately, I did something that would show whether I had been changed only by being chosen or by deciding how I wanted to be chosen. I put the pendant into the small interior pocket of my threadbare cardigan and fastened one button. The motion was precise. I did not put the pendant on my chest. I kept it where I could reach it and where it would remind me I had control. Marco watched that movement. He watched my hands, the small silver against the beige wool. You're not taking it yet, he said. No, I said. I am keeping it close. but not claiming it from a place emptied by someone else's exit. I stepped out of the car and closed the door. The night smelled of rain and amber light. The pendant in the pocket warmed where my heart could feel it. I walked away along the sidewalk. My steps were even. I did not run. The pendant pressed at my side every time the fabric moved. Marco stood in the doorway and watched me go. He did not follow. He did not call my name. He had been forced to act. Now he had to wait for the result of that action. At the corner of the next evening, I sat at a small table and ordered a coffee without consulting anyone. Marco arrived on time and sat across from me. He did not reach for the pendant. He did not ask what I would do. He listened. When I spoke, he answered directly and with details about how he would change his habits and his speech. Sophia's departure no longer hovered. It had become an event we had both referred to and done something about. We made decisions in small things that week. Marco cancelled a trip he had not told either of us about. He called his calendar into question. He showed up at a rehearsal for my volunteer class and stayed the entire evening. Each act was a test and a statement. I watched and took note. If his choices continued, the pendant might later mean what he intended. If they faltered, the pendant would be a relic of a rushed apology. 3 weeks later, I stood under the amber street light outside his building and held the pendant in my hand. I could have kept it inside the cardigan pocket, but I wanted this to be a conscious motion. I held it out and Marco closed his fingers around mine. He did not pull it back. His eyes were steady. "Alina," he said. I placed the pendant into his palm and then folded my hand over it for a second before drawing it back. "Keep your promises," I said. "Not for me because she left, but because you want to be with me." My voice was calm and it carried a boundary. Marco nodded and put the pendant back into the small box he had with him. He did not hide it. He offered it to me again a week later, after he had made changes that could be measured. He declined an invitation that had been planned without consulting me. He attended a family dinner with me at my suggestion. And he cancelled a meeting that would have left me waiting for an answer. These were not grand declarations, they were small repairs. In the end, the night closed not on a grand reunion, but on concrete acts. Sophia's last gesture, the cardigan left in the doorway, was the clearest thing of all. She had chosen herself, and in doing so, she cleared the room for a choice that was honest. Marco had been forced to make a decision and then to prove it. The final scene of that night was a small one. I walked away from Marco's car with the pendant safe in my pocket and a clear list of conditions in my mind. He watched from the doorway. Sophia walked away into the amber rain and did not look back. The city hummed. I adjusted the cardigan around my shoulders and kept walking. When I reached the corner, my phone buzzed. A calendar invite from Marco titled "Dinner Just Us." I stared at the screen, then deleted it. I typed a new time and sent it back with a single line. "Tomorrow, 7. No place named." He accepted that small exchange was an action and a test. No slogans, no speeches, only specific choices. At the building steps, Marco whispered my name once more as if asking permission. I paused, then walked inside. The pendant was warm in my pocket. I had been second once and I had let a night of betrayal force the conversation into the light. The choice remained fragile, but the path forward was built from concrete acts, not waiting. The final sound of the night was the click of my key as I locked my door, a small, definite motion that ended the chapter not with a promise but with a clear, visible change.